Hey guys, welcome to J Hauser Writes. I appreciate you joining me on this writing video, and I wanted to go over the different kinds of authors and the way that they publish, and also some pros and cons, why I am going the way that I want to go. So let's get right into that. I am working towards my goal of being a multi-genre hybrid author. So multi-genre means that I want to write in multiple genres. So that means I've written in romance, contemporary, I've written in fantasy, young adult, I've written in science fiction. Like, I don't want to just be locked into one thing. Now, I might come up with different pen names as I go to publish different things, depending on the variety. That's kind of more down the road, but for right now, that is a goal, is multi-genre and then hybrid author. So technically there's two ways of publishing, and hybrid is a combination of those two. So there is traditional publishing and there is self-publishing or indie authors. Independent, self-publishing, same thing. Indie sounds a little more hip, I think, but essentially either you go through the traditional way and it has a whole long process, and we'll talk about the pros and cons, or you take care of it yourself. What's good about one is bad about the other. Just depends on you and your books and your strategy. And so I'll give the pros and cons. We'll kind of see who wins and talk about why I want to do both. So the first aspect to consider is gatekeepers in the industry. So the point on this, if you're keeping score, is going to go to indie publishing or self-publishing. No one is going to tell you your book's not good enough, or you have to hope you're getting the right agent, because traditional publishing, that's the con for them, is they do have gatekeepers. So not only do you have to come up with a great book, great concept, well written, well done in self-editing, but you also have to find a literary agent that is good at their job, that knows what they're doing, that likes your work, that is good at marketing your genre, and then they, once they accept you, which I understand can be kind of hard, I haven't queried one yet, but once you get one, then they take it to publishers and you have to hope that they will buy it. And then it goes through this whole process. So there are gatekeepers, and it can be very hard to get a traditional book deal depending on the type of book and just the way things are trending at the time. When it comes down to it, you have to remember that literary agents and publishing houses, they're a business. It's about marketing, it's about sales, it's about making money. It's not just about a fun creative story getting out to the public. So it can be trickier. But with self-publishing, you can honestly just fall asleep on your keyboard, save that document, and upload it to Amazon for free. Like, it's really that easy, but pros and cons. So I would say that point goes to self-publishing, is you don't have to wait for that validation of other people telling you you're good enough. The next point, though, goes to traditional publishing. So that is having the legitimacy or the clout kind of behind your work. And I would say that's probably one of the number one reasons that I do want to hybrid publish. I do want to have that check mark saying you were good enough for them to put money behind and to market and to put their stamp of approval on your work. So when you go to Barnes & Noble and you see a book on the bookshelf, you know, okay, it went through some rigorous process and you have expectations. Now, self-publishing does not have that. And I have had people ask me, like, oh, why are you going self-publishing? Because it does have a stigma. And I'll be honest, I think of it that way too, because literally there's no quality checks. And you could have a book with horrible plot holes, tons of punctuation errors. There's really no guarantee that it's quality work. And I know I've done book reviews. There's some pretty bad stuff out there on Amazon. Very like poorly written blogs, copied and pasted kind of thing. So, you know, I don't like that. In the fact that I'm going through a rigorous process of tons of self-editing, lots of beta readers, critique partners. I am going to be hiring professional editors for different things, because most of the time it's not just one editor. There's developmental, line, copy. There's a lot involved. Professional proofreading, so you know that it's good quality in the end. Hiring a professional book cover artist. So there's a lot that you have to do to make it professional. And when it comes down to it, people don't always know just by looking at, you know, your Amazon listing, like, did they just scribble that up in one afternoon? Or did they put their heart and soul and wallet into this work and it will be quality? So that point goes to the traditional publisher. We're one-on-one so far on kind of what I think are the pros and cons, which one is better. But the next point does go back to self-publishing or indie authors, and that is going to be about the time constraints. And I'm specifically talking about when your book gets published. So I just started writing, honestly, less than a year ago, and I've written complete manuscripts for, I lose count, I think 7-ish full novels, one or two of those might be novellas, just a little bit shorter, but full manuscripts, I'm a quick writer and I'm going through all the editing and figuring out, how I want to release these. And, the first one that I'm releasing this year is going to come out hopefully this summer, maybe fall. I don't want to rush it because I want that quality, but I get to choose when it's released. And ideally, I will probably release the second book, which I've already written. It's already in the editing phases. I might release that just 6 months later because I want to do a rapid release. I want a different marketing strategy, and there's definitely different marketing strategies that you can do with that. But I get to choose when it goes out, and that's kind of nice. Traditional publishing, the not so great thing about that is it's not on your time frame. From the time that you even get a literary agent to it being on bookshelves, it's probably a couple of years. And I don't know, maybe you're impatient, maybe you're just excited for it to get out in the world. So that's a consideration to weigh for yourself. The next point goes back to traditional publishing. So we're kind of going back and forth. So traditional publishing, we're talking about cost. The cost to the author. The cost to the author should be zero. If you are seeking representation to sell your book to a traditional publisher, if they are charging you a penny, then that is a scam. And there are lots of those out there. They're called vanity publishers, and you pay them to help you get out there, but they don't actually really market your book. It's not what you want. At least it's not what the vast majority of people want. So you hand them your product and they have people that are editing it and proofreading it and coming up with the cover. You're not paying for any of that. The publishing company is paying for that because they're investing in you, and then you get paid for a portion of the books that sell. We'll talk a little bit about the money later, but ultimately the cost to you up front is nothing out of your pocket. Self-publishing, again, you can literally just upload a document to Amazon, call it a book, and call it a day. It's free. But if you want quality, then there is an investment. Now, I would eventually like to become better at self-editing. I would love to be able to know what a run-on sentence is. In theory, I do, but it's been a while. It's been a hot minute since I've been in those courses in college and high school where we talked about that kind of thing. So I know that I'm going to need professional editors and proofreaders. I've had fun spending hours working on kind of mock-up designs for book covers, but I know that they're not professional level. And yes, I could do it for free with my own time, but they say don't judge a book by its cover, but if we're honest, we all judge books by their cover. That's one of the main things that draws people in. So that's one thing, right? This can cost hundreds, even thousands of dollars to release one book, all on the author who is self-publishing. So if you don't have that kind of money, that can be stressful. Now, if you absolutely have no other option, make that cover yourself, and when you get some money, you can re-upload it. You could even do a second edition, that kind of thing. It's kind of messy and might not make for as good of sales or reviews. There's marketing strategies, but ultimately traditional publishing wins in this because there's not a penny that you have to spend. You don't have to worry about having savings for a project that may not actually sell a ton because you don't have that clout of the traditional publisher as well. The next point goes back to indie publishing, and this is the absolute main reason that I am self-publishing my debut novel. So it is control. Talking about the negative side of traditional publishing and control, from my understanding of traditionally published authors, it can vary, but you don't have absolute control. I already talked about control over, when it's released. You don't necessarily get a say in that, but you also might not have a choice over what the book cover looks like. Maybe even the title of the book, how it's marketed, that kind of stuff. During the editing processes, you will have professional editors who give you recommendations, and you don't have to accept all of it. They're not going to rewrite your entire book because they would have never invested in you in the first place if they didn't like it for the most part. So you do get some say in it. It's not like you're just completely forfeiting your work, but you do lose a lot of that control. Also, when it comes to things further down the road, when we're talking about permissions and rights to publishing and who knows, movie rights and that kind of stuff, you do hand a lot of that control over them. And, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand all that. I'm still looking into it. But if you really want control, traditional publishing is not necessarily the way to go. Self-publishing, you're in control of everything, which is kind of intimidating for a lot of people, but at the same time, I get to know that my work is what I intended it to be. There are some books that I am not as passionate about in the need for control. Now, I'm still passionate about them. That's why I want to put them out there. I have a book in mind that I am most definitely hoping to query to a traditional publishing literary agent this year. But series, that's the big thing for me, that I've heard that subtle heartbreak in the voices of traditionally published authors where they were hoping to publish a series and they got that first book out, but then the sales did not meet the standards of the publisher. So they said, you know what, we're not going to buy a second book in the series. It didn't sell well enough. And for me, that would break my heart. So the series that I'm putting out, it's a trilogy, though I do have like a prequel and then like a many years later kind of shoot off novellas. I would just shrivel and die if I didn't get to have the whole story out there. I'd be so disappointed. Now the first book does have, it, you know, reads well as a standalone. It does have a hint of like, ooh, there's something else is about to happen, but it does wrap up everything very well. So, you know, it could sell as a standalone, but if they said, you know what, we need to sell 50,000 copies and it only sold, I don't know, 45,000 copies, I would say, for me personally, I feel like that's a success. But you know what? They're a business and they have to pay the people that worked on your book that you didn't have to pay for. So you can't get completely mad that they don't want to invest in a series that they don't feel is going to be as successful as they want. But for me, I might gauge success differently. I might say, you know, I sold 10,000 copies. I'm over the moon about it. Let's get that second book out there. I've already written that whole series. I'm in the process of finishing one, but I would be so disappointed to not be able to finish it. And if you did want to finish it after traditionally publishing that first book, getting your rights back can be very tricky. So I just don't even want to go down that road, at least right now as a newer author. So that's something to consider, is a control point. Going back to traditional publishing is you have less effort that you have to put into it. That sounds probably just lazy, but it means that you're not having to find your own developmental editor, copy editor, line editor, proofreader, book cover designer, map maker, if you're, you know, doing like a fantasy world or something, and you don't have to figure out how to find your target market and where you should place ads and how to get it into bookstores and libraries. Like, you don't have to do that for the most part. Marketing, you do still have to do some, even if you're traditionally published, because especially as a debut author, you're not going to be at the top of their list. You're not going to be their priority. There are going to be other books with other authors that they care more about, just to be honest. But ultimately, once you've written that book and they've accepted it, then that's that golden moment where you're waiting to hear about revisions that they want. And there's a little bit of back and forth, but you're not tracking down everyone and constantly juggling so many balls to be able to get to the release. Which that's the con of self-publishing, is either you're doing it all yourself or you're coordinating with other people, and that's a lot to juggle. The last point that I will touch on is payout or income. What is the return on investment? Which one is going to get you more cash in your bank account? Which there is no shame for an author to say, I want to make money off of my book, because gosh darn it, I have bills and I would like to be able to pay them. And this point doesn't go to either, because it's really a matter of you and perspective. So when you're talking about traditional publishing, they do some marketing, they facilitate wider distribution. You know that it has a much better chance to get into bookstores. Barnes & Noble, you can walk in and find it there. Now, if you're doing self-publishing, it's a lot harder to get into physical bookstores. Amazon is a huge market. That's one I definitely intend to focus on, as do most indie publishers, but there are ways as well to get your books so that they could be picked up by libraries and bookstores, or requested from there by patrons. That being said, traditional publishing, they'll do some of the marketing, they have the connections, but you still have to do some marketing yourself. Self-publishing, you are doing it by yourself, because if you just upload that to Amazon, you're gonna sell, you know, 7 books, and you put in countless amount of hours to get to that. So you really have to put in that effort and dollar to get ads out there, to get marketing out there, and you could use a traditional publisher to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. But when it comes to your payout, that's another story. Traditional publishing gives you an advance. My understanding is it's usually like, you know, in the tens of thousands of dollars. And then once you meet that, then you get a percentage of the royalties. Though many authors do not even meet the goals to reach that initial advance. So they don't get royalties. And if they do, it's pennies on the dollar. So some self-publishers don't like that it kind of caps their payday. Self-publishing, you would be earning more like dollars on the dollars. So you do have the opportunity to earn significantly more per book. But if you don't know how to market it, if you don't have a platform, you know, selling 100 books at $4 profit is not the same as selling 45,000 books with, you know, a $20,000 advance and 25 cents per book. Like, you know, there's a wide variety of numbers. I'm just kind of throwing those out there as examples, but you have more earning potential, but you're in charge of making that money appear more in self-publishing, if that makes sense. So I can't really say one wins over the other. That one is solely on your shoulders. So I'm sorry this has been really long, but I did want to be thorough about it, especially because I have people questioning why I'm doing self-publishing. And I will say, like, there is that cringe. You don't get that clout of it being professional. Anyone can just publish a book. But I do hope that that stigma is going away more as self-publishing gets more normalized. And I do feel like it is going that direction. And speaking of trends, I think it is becoming much more of a trend from what I've seen of people wanting to be hybrid authors. We want that clout and that professional side and that extra wide reach of having traditional publishing, but we also, a lot of us want control and a different strategy. And which you do first, if you are going to be hybrid, that's up to you. I think the smartest route is to go traditional first. So your debut author mark being something that has that stamp of approval on it. And because you had a wider audience with their marketing and their connections, you might have a following that can hear, oh, hey, that author that I liked that book, they just self-published something. I mean, they might not even know that it's self-published, but they'll hear that you have something else coming out. Now, I'm not going that route. A lot of it is just because I'm impatient, and that sounds bad, but I don't want to wait 2+ years for my first book to hit bookstores. I have one that is near ready, and I'm going to get it out into the world. And the book that I want to query is very different from it, so I'm not afraid of them judging it too much on this work, and with the understanding that the work that is coming after that is after I have been more polished, because no book is going to be perfect, and you are going to grow as a writer as you go. So I hope that makes sense. I hope this wasn't too long. Hopefully I can edit it down, but I did want to be thorough. I did want to present the points in a hopefully not too chatterbox kind of way, but it is a lot to consider, and I appreciate your support. If you want to sign up for my newsletter, I would really appreciate it. You can find out there more information on what I'm publishing on my website, and also get news about when I am publishing and deals, promotions, that kind of thing. And I would love for you to subscribe. This channel is very new and I could use some love, and I just enjoy this adventure of learning to go into the scary process that a lot of people imagine but don't get the guts to do. But I am getting the guts to do it, and I want to take you along the journey with me. So thank you so much again, and have a wonderful day.